effort to save Trump is already working. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. It's not the unconstitutional effort by Democrats to imprison their direct political rivals. And oh, by the way, the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution, is the most important court within the judicial branch, and is the judicial branch of this country, and interprets the Constitution, lets everybody know what is constitutional and unconstitutional. And oh, it's not that they're actually pointing out that Democrats have engaged in egregious unconstitutional behavior, and that's why they're saving Trump. It's the Supreme Court's effort to save Trump is already working. The Atlantic, Yahoo, Democrats to hold hearings on Supreme Court Trump's immunity decision. What on earth are they going to come up with? It's a Supreme Court ruling. So anyway, Washington Post, Trump's D.C. trial may not begin until 2026 or later. Then you have a left-leaning alternate publication, The Real Villain, how the Supreme Court is quietly working to keep Trump out of jail. Maybe it's unconstitutional to put him in jail. Okay, maybe, just maybe, the Supreme Court siding with Trump shows how unconstitutional Democrats have behaved, or the manner that Democrats have behaved within is unconstitutional. But anyway, hit subscribe to this channel right now. We'll get to the Supreme Court victories for Trump and how they're going to catapult him into the Oval Office again. But let's listen to some discussion. We'll talk about the debate. I want to talk about the debate with everybody here. And we had a very, very, very good live stream during the debate. But let's recap here.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. So, Donald Trump had more haymakers than you think. And that's the subject of the riff. In the presidential debate last night, Donald Trump had some very serious haymakers on policy that knocked Kamala Harris for a loop. Now, right at the top, Mr. Trump got his tax cut and economic growth message out. Take a listen.
Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
All right. And then he followed up right away with his attack on inflation. Roll the tape.
I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy.
All right. Trouble is, the ultra-biased ABC moderators only had one question on the economy, which is the number one issue for this election. And that was clearly to Mr. Trump's disadvantage and helped Kamala, who really has no defense for the failure of Bidenomics. And I acknowledge she succeeded in distracting Mr. Trump on some things like J6 or the size of his rallies or the 2020 election outcome. But Mr. Trump kind of pounded her constantly on the open border illegal immigration catastrophe.
See, when he had to address those issues, whatever topics, the topics that were just addressed, he had to address those issues. She brought them up. He wasn't going to cower away from any of these. So, I mean, the moderators, of course, leaned towards Harris. Okay, they're all, the media in general is a mouthpiece, an echo chamber for the Democratic Party. Okay, that's obvious. I think he did very well. The only thing he could have done is hammered home the fact that their policies caused all of these problems, especially their economic policy. So that's really, like, he could have just hammered that home.
He also hit her hard on foreign policy, especially their failure on Afghanistan, which then led to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And Harris had her usual non-support for Israel in the Iran-Hamas wars. Meanwhile, Trump won big on all those points. He also won big on the crime issue and on the unpopular EV, Green New Deal, climate change, misnamed Inflation Reduction Act issue. He hit her on all that, and frankly, she didn't have any comeback. And then Mr. Trump knocked her back on Biden-Harris judicial lawfare and weaponization when she tried to just call him a felon. And then
So she was debating somebody who was indicted over 90 times. That didn't resonate with the American people because of the Supreme Court. So that's why the title of this live stream, Supreme Court Gives Him the Victory. I like the title of most of my live streams. Okay, the Supreme Court is the one pillar of our democracy that is keeping Democrats at bay. Even the federal courts side with Democrats. The Supreme Court looks and says, yeah, we're the only institution not influenced by media and this very warped zeitgeist. And what you're doing is unconstitutional. The reason the Supreme Court sides with Trump is not because they like Trump. It's not because they're friends with Trump or loyal to Trump. It's because it's unconstitutional what Democrats are doing. That's why all three liberal justices in a unanimous Supreme Court decision overturned the Colorado ban. Okay? And then Justice Jackson sided with conservatives on lessening the sentences for January defendants. The one thing that the liberal justices were unanimous on is immunity, but that's because of the belief that it wasn't politically motivated, these indictments against Trump, which of course they were.
And then Mr. Trump whacked her on some more on her untruths regarding things like Project 2025 and the in vitro fertilization, which he favors. And then she accused him of signing a national abortion ban, which he has denied many, many times and denied it again last night. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump asked her bluntly whether she favored abortions in the 7, 8, or 9 months or even partial birth, and she would not answer. So I think those are all losers for her, every one of them. Now, it's too bad the former president didn't detail his pro-growth policies to cut taxes and cut regulations and cut energy costs. He could have said a lot more on that, and a couple of numbers would have gone a long way. For example, there's brand new Census Bureau data out that show real median household income for typical families under Biden-Harris have still not even reached Donald Trump's 2019 level. Actually,
we had record highs in household median income and still hasn't reached 2019 levels. Isn't that interesting?
Real income growth for working folks under Trump was almost 5 times greater than under Biden, Harris, or even pre-pandemic federal spending, which as a share of GDP averaged 20.5% under Trump.
Let's listen to this again.
Now, it's too bad the former president didn't detail his pro-growth policies to cut taxes and cut regulations and cut energy costs. He could have said a lot more on that, and a couple of numbers would have gone a long way. For example, there's brand new Census Bureau data out that show real median household income for typical families under Biden-Harris have still not even reached Donald Trump's 2019 level. Actually, real income growth for working folks under Trump was almost 5 times greater than under Biden, Harris, or even pre-pandemic federal spending, which as a share of GDP averaged 20.5% under Trump compared to nearly 26% under Biden. And that's an inflation problem. So that stuff would have gone a long way. Now, in general, I thought Mr. Trump could have emphasized the word growth and his growth vision, mainly because Democrats like Kamala don't have growth in their vocabulary. Now, Mr. Trump did a good job in attacking unfair trading practices and why his tariffs were never inflationary. And indeed, Biden-Harris actually kept most of his tariffs in place. But then I wish he had mentioned Elon Musk and the Efficiency Commission to root out wasteful, inefficient, and corrupt spending.
They kept the Trump tariffs. They went after Trump saying it was a tax, or no, a sales tax. They kept his tariffs.
Maybe even ripping into the whole D.C. swamp. I think Elon Musk would have gone a long way in that debate. I also think he should have mentioned the support of Democrats like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard. That would have resonated well. Now, for sure, Ms. Harris was prepared and undoubtedly outperformed the very low performance bar set for her. And as I've said before many times, she is not stupid, she is not a moron or any of that. However, her smug facial expressions and the frequent rolling of her eyeballs, that didn't do her any good. Ms. Harris' concluding statement was really close to being a word salad. But Mr. Trump had the last word, and I thought he delivered a crunching uppercut with this.
She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it?
All right. Kamala Harris is Joe Biden's co-pilot, and over 3.5 years on issue after issue, be it the economy, border, crime, inflation, foreign policy, she could not get the job done. And I think that's why it's time for a change.
I have no clue why anyone would vote for Harris. Knowing, it's 4 years into Biden and Harris. Are you doing better economically? Is the country doing better in terms of foreign policy? Crime is up when it comes to assaults. Okay, when it comes to random theft throughout major cities, like retail chains. Okay, so they say, well, overall crime is down. Yeah, it went through the roof when Democrats, media, and bureaucrats pushed to shut down economic activity. Homicides went through the roof, overall crime, a lot of terrible things took place when you shut down economic activity. A lot of terrible things. So yeah, it's down from the recent highs, big deal. But assaults are up, especially in major blue cities. But let's continue. So the Supreme Court, really quickly, we started off. The Supreme Court victory is here. You have that is the foundation of why Trump won. It really is the foundation. Okay, they indicted him, and he hasn't been sentenced yet, so he's not a convicted felon before the sentencing. But he actually lost a criminal trial, and that was about 30 seconds of Harris's strategy against Trump. They couldn't even touch that strategy. And that's one of the reasons he dominated and won. The fact that she was coherent meant to liberal Democrats she had been victorious. Just because you ousted the one person that actually won your primary, Biden was cheated, just like Bernie Sanders was cheated. But Democrats are so used to a fantasy in terms of this farce in terms of a primary. The man won his primary. They don't even have a functioning primary. They pontificate about democracy. But let's continue.
Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy.
I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies. People start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Fracking? She's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police? She's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly. She was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. I have talked with military leaders, some of
And Democrats had a very difficult time processing Trump's 2016 victory to the point of creating a new Cold War, a Red Scare that they still believe. These are the wonderful, morally superior, intelligent, rational individuals who don't believe myths and rumors, but they still believe that Trump is an operative of the Kremlin. Why? Because the intel community had a memo or an assessment that said so. Zero evidence. There was never even a shred of evidence. They purchased a Steele dossier, and the dossier was riddled with, actually with dis and misinformation. And so, and there was not a shred of evidence. They still believe it. And then the rebuttal is, well, the intel community said. Well, what if the intel community said then people were devouring animals? Would you believe it then? So you can't just rely on an assessment from the intel community to back your rumors or your fantasies regarding Trump. So he was exonerated for that years ago. They still believe the nonsense. I mean, so many times she brought up the debunked both sides myth that they created. And the commenters never even defended Trump. They always do. They always tried to defend Harris, though.
Of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace.
Former President Trump and Vice President Harris sparring on top issues, including the economy, abortion.
It's like they bring up, so she brings up military people. Look at what's taking place in terms of foreign policy. So in terms of foreign policy, it's an unmitigated disaster. Okay. The last time we had such a terrible foreign policy was the Bush administration, and prior to that, it was Jimmy Carter. But their rebuttal is, well, we spoke to high-ranking military officials. Yeah, high-ranking military officials are going to tell high-ranking political officials what they want to hear. They're all government officials. And they have political reasons for the things they say in private, number one. Number two, she could be very well lying. She went, okay, the whole thing with Trump is, oh, he's spreading rumors. And then she goes and spreads a rumor that high-ranking military officials don't like him. It's like, by and large, veterans and active duty personnel vote Trump over Harris, or voted Trump over Biden, or vote Republican over Democrat, by and large.
Foreign policy, and of course, the southern border at last night's presidential debate. Joining me now is Chief Pollster of the Trafalgar Group and co-host of Polling Plus, Robert Cahaly. Robert, good morning. I do want to get your instant reaction to the debate. And do you think that the debate will move the needle in this election?
Well, the first reaction is it wasn't the best night for Trump. He got triggered a little bit by what she was talking, especially with the rallies. He's very defensive about his rallies. But what matters is we did an Insta poll during the course of the debate, and we saw no difference. There are a significant amount of people who thought that Trump didn't do well, who were still for Trump. So the race was still tied at the end with the survey we did of battleground states. So the first answer is it wasn't the best night, but we don't see a huge effect immediately.
Yeah, Britt mentioned that last night on Fox News Channel. He said it was not a good night for Donald Trump. It was a good night for her. She was obviously prepared.
Well, okay, so I think I love this poster from Trafalgar. He's awesome. With Brit Hume, I don't get, like, they were giddy. It was MSNBC or like other liberal publications were giddy, like, oh, even Fox News says that Trump did poorly. And I'm like, how did he do poorly? Everything that the man represented for half of the country, not just, MAGA or Make America Great Again people or supporters, or, I mean, literally almost half the electorate. Democrats say, oh, we get the popular vote. You have virtually all of media. You should get the popular vote. Okay. And you have all the major cities in the country. And we can talk about that, but we won't. But you have all of the media, all of Hollywood, and still Trump comes within, like less than 10 million or 8 million or he had like, it was about 3 million more that Clinton had. Okay, and she had virtually all of the media narrative. But I wanted somebody to represent and battle and fight for his country. I shouldn't say that, but like fight for his political value system. Okay, someone to battle, someone to go toe to toe, and Trump does that. I don't want somebody who is civil and I mean, I want someone civil, but I don't want somebody who is afraid to get into a verbal disagreement or even argument. I want somebody who is a real, genuine human being. Trump is a genuine human being. He's not an actor. Okay, Harris doesn't believe any of the things she says. She wanted fracking. She wanted single payer. She wanted Green New Deal. She wanted all of these things. Now she says she doesn't. She's like, Democrats don't believe in anything. Most of their policies they don't believe in, especially the left-leaning policies. Okay, and she's linked to organizations that bailed people out during a summer where billions in property damage was caused. Okay, I understand why it happened. I get it. I'm not equating the underlying reasons, but you look at Trump and think, oh, they say that he had a bad night. What was so bad about it? Yeah, the one thing is he could have hammered home the fact that she had been there for 4 years. And so how can anyone expect anything differently from a Harris presidency? But other than that, I wanted Trump to act the way he did. It was fantastic. It was the first time, almost certainly the first time, a major Democratic politician was spoken to in that manner. Because all of media revere Democrats. And once they get to that certain point, it's a machine. The machine propels Democrats. You think that Biden or Harris or Clinton were ever spoken to in the manner Trump speaks to them? Taken to task for inflation and foreign policy nightmares? No, it was very good. But I don't get, you know what? Oh, it wasn't a good night. Like, what's a good night for Trump? I don't get it. He is who he is. It's his personality.
And was able to needle him and that he took the bait at the same time, as you're saying. Does that really change voter perspectives? It is about the swing state. It is about the swing voters. I want to get your take on that. And also, there were some other kind of moments, if you will. One was that when it came down to health care, one of the things that's gone viral from him is that he said, well, I have a concept of what health care would be. She says, I'm going to expand the Affordable Care Act. She laid out her plans. He said, I have concepts. Did that moment resonate with those that you surveyed?
It wasn't something that a lot of them pointed out. But what did happen, that probably is the longest lasting effect, is you got to realize there's a lot of people who didn't watch the conventions, who don't keep up with the news cycle, who were tuned in last night. And so what they heard from Trump are a lot of things about Kamala Harris they haven't heard before. And so if the campaign and the outside groups will follow up those things with examples of her own words saying the things that Trump accused her of saying in the past and demonstrating the flip-flop, then the questions he created last night, especially in those swing states where these issues matter, like fracking, I think the net effect down the road of this thing could be very positive. Because, again, nobody's mentioned a lot of the things they heard about Kamala Harris. This is the first time they heard any of it.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Right. And maybe he missed a few opportunities to fact check her, and the moderators did not do that. Let's go through this latest wave of national and swing state polling. All of these were conducted before last night's debate, just before. So let's go through these. I've got Lee Carter on set with me. So the latest NPR PBS News Marist poll shows another essential deadlock. Vice President Harris leads by 1.5.
So what was so bad about the Trump administration that you would want 4 years of another Biden-Harris? And I'm asking this if anyone stumbles upon this. Aside from political power and influence, okay, aside from appeasing media, making Hollywood happy, and appeasing all the wonderful major publications and writers in the country, What is it about? Is it the economy? No, because in terms of, this is the first generation of Americans where half the country will literally vote for a presidency again where the economy stinks. And then they'll say, well, the economy isn't that bad enough. No. Trump routinely is like 20% ahead on the economy over Harris and over Biden. So I don't get it. What is it about Trump that you would rather have high inflation, high interest rates, a stock market on the brink of a collapse, job numbers that are dwindling, median income, household median income hasn't even reached what it was in 2019. And you've had 4 years, Democrats have had 4 years to make things better. Harris said, oh, well, we went into power with what Trump left us. You Democratic governors shutting down their states gleefully and then opening back up once Biden was in office. Okay, what did Trump leave you? That wasn't his policy to shut down the U.S. economy. In fact, he said we have to open up. He shouldn't even have acquiesced for 2 weeks. He should have from day one said this cannot happen. But then they took it and ran with it, and it was like 1.5 to 2 years before things completely opened up. And then in blue states, they were open, then shut, then open, then shut, even 1.5 years after. Actually, even 2 years after. In 2 years, even 2 years after, it was like some places in the country were still like deciding whether to completely open up. So I just don't get it. I don't understand. Are you better off in terms of the economy? Is your pocketbook better off? Probably not. You think foreign policy is better or worse? Have countries been embroiled in turmoil? Have more countries, more regions of the world been embroiled in turmoil? We'll leave it at that. Yes. So what is it aside from political power? You just want control. What you think you want control the future of the country. Even though in terms of the economy and foreign policy, it's a failure. But you still want that control. God forbid Trump gets us back to a great economy again and a much infinitely better foreign policy. God forbid. I mean, it's just like you're putting, like they kept saying, party over, country over party. Like you're literally putting your political party over the country if you don't vote for Trump.
49% to Trump's 48%. The same goes for the latest New York Times Siena College poll. Essentially, that's deadlocked. This time it shows Trump up by 1 point, 48% to Harris's 47%. And then let's look at the battleground states where it really matters. A new Quinnipiac poll shows Georgia tilting towards Trump. He leads 49% to Harris's 46%. If there's a two-way matchup, North Carolina, Harris leads 50% to Trump's 47%. Both states technically too close to call. So, these all fall within the margin of error, Robert, to be very clear. And all of this done just ahead of the debate last night.
And that's the same results we've gotten in every one of the swing states, whether it was me doing them for Trafalgar and Matt Towery doing them for Inside Advantage. Right. We've been kind of splitting the states up. We saw the same thing. It's within 1 point either direction in almost every state. So these things are very, very tight. And we do know that polls traditionally underrepresent Trump. There'll be a new wave of these polls that'll come out in the next week, post-debate polls, seeing what the effect of it is. And that's what really matters, is what resonated with those swing voters and what mattered. Like I said, one of the most significant things we saw is people who did not think Trump won the debate who are still for Trump.
They're still going to vote for him. I've got Lee Carter, pollster
Absolutely.
Lee Carter on set. Lee.
So in our focus group last night, really no one changed their mind. We had a number of
A debate should be about substance. Okay, what substance did Harris offer? Did she explain why inflation is so high? She didn't even address that. She just talked about how she grew up in a middle-class family. Okay, Trump said we had a better economy when I was president, which is true. We didn't have the foreign policy debacles, which is true. Did Harris explain the foreign policy catastrophes why these things took place during their presidency? No. She didn't explain why during Biden and Harris's tenure all of these things happened. The foreign policy disasters, the inflation, the high interest rates. She didn't explain. And of course the moderators weren't going to force her to explain. And then people say, well, Trump didn't do well. What did you want the man to do? I don't get it. It's his personality. He's not going. If she brings up a topic that is false or misleading, which she did numerous times, people leave your rallies. Okay, he's going to address it. Why should he not address it? I don't get that. He should then talk about inflation? Okay, maybe. Maybe if she brings up the rally, he should be like, you know what? And by the way, inflation is up. And then kind of give up that point that, maybe people are leaving his rally. Who knows? I don't see why. I don't get, like, he had a bad night. Why? Why did he have a bad night? He addressed every single thing she said. Okay? He addressed every single thing. And then, he said something you could say, well, there was no evidence for it. People consuming, animals. And so that was a rumor. And you know what else was a rumor? That Trump was a Kremlin operative. Democrats don't care about rumors as long as the rumors benefit them. And as long as the rumors are spread by intel agencies. Okay, that's just fine. So if they purchase a dossier to actually create these rumors, that's fine. They get an FEC fine for it. The Federal Election Commission actually fines the Clinton campaign and the DNC for purchasing a dossier full of lies. Even Michael Cohen was suing BuzzFeed before he had to, about face. They don't care about rumors. They'll spread the rumor that Trump said that he disparaged fallen Americans. One publication literally spread that rumor. That was purely a rumor. But as long as it hurts Trump, hearsay, gossip, rumors, no problem. If Trump then parrots a rumor, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And then Democrats, in their usual apoplectic crusade to get Trump, end up publicizing the egregious rumor they find, to be offensive.
Of undecided voters, not one of them heard anything that changed their mind or answered the questions that they really had. One about Trump's temperament, which one was going to show up. I think Trump failed on that. Two was Kamala Harris, what you're going to do in the economy. She failed on that. So really no movement. But my question really...
How could Trump's temperament be as important as the economy? Only in this day and age, only in this era of American politics, only this generation of Americans, would one's personality be just as important as the economy. I don't get it. I would say that the economy is infinitely more important than anyone's personality. I'm conservative on most things now. If the economy was great, foreign policy was not the unmitigated disaster it is, and we had a functioning border, I'd vote for Biden or Harris. But we don't have any of those things. It's like an unmitigated disaster, like objectively a disaster. You're going to have historians who are liberal Democrats justify and the indefensible. You'll have writers, you'll have very intelligent people say, oh, Trump is an authoritarian. These are all opinionated, subjective, absurd statements to circumvent the reality that the economy stinks and foreign policy is a catastrophe. Oh, but Trump is mean. At the end of the day, Trump is mean. Even though the economy stinks, Trump is mean. And people will actually, gone are the days where, like in the 80s, for example, or 90s, you still had people who remembered the Great Depression. Okay, their greatest trauma was the 1930s, where they might have been just born, or they might have been 10 years old, or 20 years old, and they remember. Okay, and so you have people who used to remember in the 80s the Great Depression, or even the 90s. Now the greatest trauma of a morally superior liberal Democrat is Trump. Trump's personality. 4 years, great economy. More people lost their lives in Biden's first year of you-know-what, so don't bring that up. And the greatest, traumatic experience for the electorate is Trump defeating Clinton. So you have one generation of Americans that experienced the Great Depression, and then another generation of Americans that their biggest problem was Trump defeating Clinton. So that's how you get this very dysfunctional landscape.
It really is. When you're looking at this, do you see more undecided voters right now than you would expect to at this moment? Because a lot of people say, how can anybody be undecided? But we had a number of them in studio last night, and I would just love to hear your perspective on how many people are still out there trying to figure out who they're going to vote for.
Well, first of all, everything you're saying makes sense of what you saw in your focus group. What we find is it depends on how you ask the question. If you give them an undecided option, make it open into like, who are you for? We do see a higher undecided. But if you say, if the election were held tomorrow and you had to decide, we see an undecided in most swing states that drops below 5.
Robert Cahaly, great to have you on this morning. Thank you for the research and for taking the time. And, it's a lot of caffeine for a lot of you and your colleagues this morning. We appreciate your time.
I want you to ignore most of the commentary you've heard from the pundit class on the debate last night. As usual, the talking heads misread the concerns of millions of Americans watching at home. Tonight, I'm going to give you the key takeaways from the debate. First, ABC's moderators were essentially acting as Kamala Harris's debate coaches. Time and again, they served up softballs with zero follow-ups.
Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. What would you do to fight climate change?
A really quick response.
So Democrats literally flooded the country full of strategic petroleum reserves. Okay? They depleted the strategic petroleum reserves, which is not part of the Green New Deal. But it's like the average person voting Democrat doesn't know this, doesn't care, even if they do know it, and will reluctantly say, well, we had to lower the cost of oil. But again, as long as they spout these platitudes, it's all good. It's just about platitudes and a good one. The sensibilities, if you honor the sensibilities of the wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrats, they'll vote for complete catastrophe, which is what they're still voting for. The economy is a disaster. High interest rates, high inflation, household median income still hasn't even reached 2019. And we're on the brink of a stock market collapse. And you have a record highs in credit card debt. And you have jobs dwindling. And you have a commercial real estate debacle on the horizon. And you have a real estate crisis that was brought on by Harris and Biden's immigration policies also. Then you have too many problems to count in terms of foreign policy. So I just don't get it. I mean, it's all public relations. This is the first generation of Americans that will put public relations ahead of economic concerns.
Response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
You're great. Do you agree you're great? No, this was entirely predictable. Now, remember, a top exec at Disney, whose portfolio includes ABC News, is a longtime pal of Kamala Harris. But another key point, and I think very, very important, is that Vice President Harris showed us last night that she's really not a lot more than a puppet of the failed D.C. establishment. Now, she took weeks to rehearse, during which she said had no adversarial press interviews, and then, with a friendly panel, showed that she can memorize some lines and speak in platitudes. From the start, Harris knew she would not be fact-checked or ask real follow-up questions. But still, even with her absurd ABC running mates helping her, Harris revealed a lot about herself. And the picture was not altogether positive. Regular Americans who don't sit in studios like this, who don't get paid to talk for a living, will not be moved.
She didn't talk about her policy changes between 2020 and 2024. Her whole centrist, moderate stance is just a facade.
She's saying she can fix the problems that her administration has caused, but I just don't know if I can afford to take that risk.
All these policies that she's saying she's going to implement on day one of presidency, why does she have to wait until, January 20th to do that?
For the state of Texas, honestly, it's been...
Good point. Now, they didn't want to see Kamala's smirks or her head bobbing up and down. They wanted actual policy. They didn't get it. One Milwaukee woman who voted Democrat in the past elections told the New York Times that the debate nudged her unexpectedly toward Trump. And out of the 10 undecideds that Reuters talked to, 6 went for Trump after the debate.
So there's 2 reasons for undecideds. One is they don't want to. A person doesn't want to say they're voting for Trump. There's still this pressure. They say that Trump pressures people. Nobody pressures more than media, Democrats, Hollywood to vote against Trump. So people just don't want. I mean, you couldn't wear a "Make America Great Again" hat for years and years and years in this country, in certain locations. You couldn't put a Trump sign on your lawn without disgruntled maniacs who were wonderful and morally superior trying to pull them, off of your lawn. So if you're undecided, it was probably like, well, you know what? You don't want to tell people you're voting Trump. The next, I just can't imagine. I'm speculating here that an undecided is just they don't take politics that seriously and it's not that important, which actually is a very healthy way of looking at things. But I just don't get how anyone could be undecided. I mean, do you want a worse off economy? Do you want an economy that's worse than what it is now? Okay? You're actually like, this is not a difficult decision. The economy is not good. Foreign policy is not good. Why would you vote Harris? I don't get it. I swear, aside from apoplectic ideological reasons that you're beholden to a political party, it is part of your identity, it's part of who you are, and you want to attain political power at all costs, even if it hurts the country. But other than that, I just don't understand. But let's continue.
Well, from her answer on Ukraine, we know this. She will follow the Dick and Liz Cheney playbook on foreign policy, meaning no end in sight to funding more endless wars that we seem to never be able to win. But gosh, did she memorize the names of those scary weapons?
Because of our support, because of the air defense, the free country.
The war settled.
It's climate change.
Security bill, which I supported. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax. There was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses. I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy.
Oh, I love that. For some reason, that just cracked me up all night. The opportunity. What have we been having for the last 3.5 years? Well, first of all, under Trump, the entire country was an opportunity economy. The Wall Street Journal amplified the devastating census data just released yesterday. We talked a little bit about this last night. Here's the upshot. The upshot is that real median household income remains lower than in 2019 and has barely grown since 2020.
So I always bring up household median income. We had record high in 2019. Okay, 2019 was the last year where the U.S. economy, and in terms of foreign policy as well, the last year where, it was the last year we had a true foothold atop the world economy, and in terms of foreign policy, we were at our strongest. The last moment that we were at our greatest in terms of influence and power and strength. I really do. A lot of it is because of Trump. But I mean, even you look at even 2015, 2016 with President Obama, we were still, I think, a stronger country than we are now. We got a lot stronger with Trump because we moved beyond, that failed Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld Obama type of foreign policy. And they were very similar. President Obama was very similar. He helped, his intervention in Libya helped destroy that country. You can look that up. It's funny that Democrats don't ever vacation in any of the places they voted to save. Same with never Trump Republicans. But the upshot is that real median household income remains lower than in 2019, barely grown since 2020. The contrast between the first 3 years of Trump and Biden presidency is striking. The editorial board. And then the editorial board, I think, said, oh, Trump did bad in the debate. I was like, what? I don't get it. I don't get it. But anyway, this alone, there's no rebuttal to this. Household median income. It just means the money, the wealth that the average household in the U.S. has. That's it. We have less wealth than we did in 2019. Less wealth. Your family generally, or actually the average family, I shouldn't say you watching, the average U.S. family has less wealth. Because when you factor in greater debt, even if you say, well, our savings account is still the same, well, but yeah, there's more debt likely. And still, people vote Harris. I don't understand. I go, oh, he's an authoritarian. He's not an authoritarian, but it's like, he's not an authoritarian. It's actually Democrats who literally want to imprison Trump on nonsense, which is why the Supreme Court calls them out all the time. And then they're like, ah. But anyway, let's continue. I mean, why would you vote for Harris when you know people were wealthier under Trump? And it was his policy that directly correlate to that. Don't say, well, it was President Obama's administration. We're talking 2019 going into 2020. The beginning of 2020, same thing. We're talking 4 years into Trump's administration, before Democrats shut down economic activity in major states. And it wasn't Trump's policy to do that, and we didn't have to do that. That was a choice.
The contrast between the first 3 years of Trump and Biden presidencies is striking. The Trump tax reform and deregulation boosted growth, which resulted in a tighter labor market and rising wages without fueling inflation. Boom. Facts. He produced results. She produces decline. And if she's elected, it'll be more of what we've already seen.
But Trump is an authoritarian. He's against democracy. He's also funded by the Kremlin. And George Clooney doesn't like Trump. And also, Hollywood despises Trump. And Liz Cheney doesn't like Trump, and Dick Cheney too. And all the good people don't like Trump. So therefore, let's have a bad economy and a bad foreign policy. This is why we can't have good things as a country.
More inflationary spending, more manufacturing jobs lost, more migrants flooding in, lower wages for American workers. In other words, on key domestic issues, Harris will be no different than the nightmare of Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden, what we've been dealing with. Again, a continuous flow of humanity across the border, growth-killing regulations, offshoring jobs, and of course, higher taxes. And finally, Americans who didn't know her radical views heard them last night for the very first time.
She wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. Private medical insurance, that's another thing she doesn't want to. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President, my value.
She wants single-payer health care. It's government-run health care. That's what she wants. She said she wants single-payer. So it's like they never call out the Democrat. I mean, the same thing happened with Clinton. The same thing happened with Biden. They rally around. It's just what happened to the days where media did not take a side. What happened to those days?
Have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made.
At least but I'm not getting back to that. She never did explain her flip-flops, and of course, the fake moderators never pressed her. However, from this, we can assume that she is still the same extremist she's been her entire life on social issues. Beyond supporting unrestricted abortion in all 50 states, Harris is for paid sex surgeries for migrants, legalization of hard drugs, and of course, you bet, boys and girls sports. Over the moon they got when Tim Walz was selected as her VP? Well, he became his own meme. And they, of course, were giddy, positively giddy about the DNC. But the headlines last week? Where's the bounce? There was no bounce. And now, once again, they're doing the Snoopy dance after her debate performance. But still, Harris has a very heavy lift here. And unless she can convince enough voters that abortion...
I think that it's likely going to be close, and we'll find out Trump won November 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, or 15th, or 16th, or 17th, or 18th, or 19th, because Democrats love the entire month of counting for some bizarre reason. I think there's a small likelihood. There is a chance that it's a route that Trump just does so much better than people. I can't, they had to shut down economic activity and pretend and create a dystopian nightmare of a society 4 years ago, where they allowed billions in property damage, no problem, but you couldn't go to a cafe or you couldn't even go to the beach. And still, we had to find out days later that, oh yeah, the Biden won. And then, of course, they ousted Biden because he's very, very competent. Although he did put a Make America Great Again hat on. That was pretty cool. That was actually very cool. But I just don't see this economy and this foreign policy propelling Harris to a win. But there are enough indoctrinated people. Okay, you're talking about people who will disown friends and family for voting for Trump. It doesn't matter if there's a depression, economic catastrophe, they'll still vote because they want political. It's about political power, and it's about fitting in with media. Media is very important to a great many people. That is reality. It's not, okay, liberal journalists lying by omission all the time, 24/7, in this apoplectic effort against Trump. It's, oh my God, the good, smart, wonderful, caring, rational, reasonable people despise Trump, so I should also. That's the mentality. But I think Trump is on his way to a pretty resounding victory. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. God bless you all. See you tomorrow, everybody.